Morning, happy Thursday, and thank you for joining me. I'm Allegra of Beyond Your Wildest Dreams, and if this is your first time watching me, I am a brain science based productivity and time management expert, which means that I help you find more time and energy in your life because who doesn't need that, especially if you are juggling multiple things such as work and family and relationships and I don't know, sandwich generation, which I am in all those things. And I have co-authored or authored 4 short books that are all designed to give you more time and energy, and if you don't know where to start, I would start with the first one. I would start with this one, 3, 2, 1, done. 3 simple strategies to get your to-do list done. This is the next best thing to adding hours to your day, and you can find all of my books at tinyurl.com/bywd books. And if you're listening to the recording of this, then you're listening to the Harness the Power of Planning podcast, which I put up and it goes up everywhere. So if you all ever want to re-listen or rewatch, you can always find it at wherever you listen to your podcasts, the Harness the Power of Planning podcast. And for a long time, I've been going live on Instagram, but for some reason, that does not seem to be working the last couple of weeks. So Instagram, sorry if you're not finding me there. YouTube is more reliable. Unfortunately, I guess. I don't know. So thank you for joining me. If you're joining me live, you can comment in the chat. I will see it. And recently I've started a new thing, which is that I want to welcome all of you for listening. Thank you so much for listening. I'm heard in 90 countries now. And I decided that I don't know a lot about every single country that's listed on the list. Besides the United States, the second most listened to country is Brazil. I gave some factoids about Brazil. So now the third most listened from country is France, which I do know more about France than I know about Brazil just from personal experience since I've been to France. I haven't been to Brazil yet. However, I did find some interesting facts that were surprising to me. And so I thought I would share them. I guess I kind of knew it, but I hadn't thought about it. But France actually shares borders with 8 countries, which seems like a lot since I'm based in the United States, which only borders 2 countries. French cooking was recognized as a UNESCO cultural heritage in 2010. I wonder if there are other countries that have that because that seems like quite the prestige to be noticed for that. I mean, I'm sure they're proud of their cuisine, but to say that it's a cultural heritage, that's amazing. Uh, France, the typical French person consumes 57 pounds of cheese. That sounds like a lot, but I'm guessing that the United States is not far behind because we all like cheese. Now, this I did know, which I think is really fascinating, which is the Eiffel Tower was originally intended to be temporary, but it is now the most visited monument in France, attracting 7 million visitors. And France is the most visited country in the world with over 90 million tourists. This is not the most recent statistic. It says 2019. So obviously COVID probably changed a lot of things, but was the most visited country. And then this one I think is really interesting. It is illegal in France to waste food. Supermarkets must donate unsold food. I think that is awesome. I think it should be illegal to waste food everywhere. My gosh. So anyway, welcome for joining me. If you are new, then I usually start out with pulling a card from this deck of cards here. And I never know what it is because I don't read it in advance. So let's see what it says. Only those who will risk going too far can possibly find out how far one can go. T.S. Eliot. Only those who will risk going too far can possibly find out how far one can go. T.S. Eliot. Well, let's see. Gosh, I feel like there's a positive way to interpret that and there's a negative way to interpret that. But you know what? I'm going to interpret it the positive way because I feel like that's the choice we have every day is there's a moment between experiencing something and reacting to it, and that's where you get to decide who you are. So I'm going to interpret it positively. Only those who will risk going too far can possibly find out how far one can go. Well, if you've listened to me before, then you know that I've had my own business for a long time and that a few years ago I started doing stand-up comedy. And I love it. I love stand-up comedy. I love what it brings to my professional life here because I think it's made my public speaking sharper, crisper, hopefully funnier. I think that it makes my brain work in a different way, which is really interesting, especially as someone who's getting older and who has family members who've had dementia and Alzheimer's. Keeping my brain sharp is something that is very important to me. And I think that if you had told me 6 years ago that I would be doing stand-up comedy and producing a show and have that show be sold out multiple times, that I wouldn't believe you. But only because I was willing to try have I gone to that place. I mean, it's like that age-old saying, we miss 100% of the shots we don't take. So, I agree with T.S. Eliot. I think that what's the point of having this human experience if you don't take advantage of all the things that interest you? So, hopefully, I'd love to hear things that you're thinking about taking advantage of this year. What is it? Put in the chat. What is it that you have been saying to yourself for years that you want to do? What is the first step on that journey? What can you do? Have you always thought about hiking the Pacific Trail? Have you always thought about starting your own business? Have you thought about moving someplace, learning a language? What's the one thing that you can do? I want to hear. Please put in the chat. I see all of you watching. Put in the chat what it is that you want to stop thinking about and start doing this year. And maybe we can brainstorm some ideas. I love that. I also want to mention that next week's topic, oh, by the way, this week's topic is talking about tech boundaries. And man, they are so important with what's going on right now. I don't know about you, but I have definitely been losing some sleep because I have not been following my tech boundaries as strictly as I usually do. So I will be talking about that in a moment. And next week's topic is going to be why and how to be a lifelong learner. So, why and how to be a lifelong learner. That will be next week's topic. So, before I get into the tech thing, I do want to talk about something that based on what we talked about last week. Last week, I talked about when is enough enough and how my family is in year 3 of our grand edit and how, I have been blessed to live 50, almost 52 years. And, over 52 years, you manage to just accumulate a lot of things. Sometimes it's things you buy, sometimes it's gifts, sometimes it's things that you inherit because people have passed. And I am trying to get to the point where I only keep things that I'm actually going to use. And so to that end, I have been going through a lot of things, drawers that I don't always go through, or I've been going all the way through the drawers. So yesterday, I emptied out 2 drawers and I completely went through them and I found this handkerchief. This lovely handkerchief, if you're listening to the podcast, you're probably not seeing, but it's heavily embroidered and it has, if you look close, you can see it actually has a pineapple design here, which is really cool. And I think this type of embroidery is actually called, I want to say cut work, where they create more space. So with their embroidery, it's interesting. I'm not sure if that's the right term. Feel free to correct me. Embroidery is not my thing. Anyway, I found this handkerchief when I was cleaning out my grandmother's belongings. And my grandmother, by the time I found this handkerchief, she had already lost her ability to speak. My grandmother passed late last year, but she has not really been able to speak or have much memory for a number of years now. And I forgot that I had this handkerchief, as one does. You have something, you think, oh, that's pretty. And I love that it was my grandmother's. I'm going to hold on to that. And I realized, what am I holding onto it for? So that I can pass it on to my kiddo? Am I going to frame this? I mean, where would I put it? You know what? I decided I'm going to use this handkerchief. I'm going to use this we so often we have these things and we say, "Oh, they're too pretty to use. I'm going to save it for a special occasion." Well, guess what? Every day is a special occasion, and this handkerchief is beautiful, and it reminds me of somebody I love. So guess what? I am going to like it pains me to do this because you see how perfect it is. I have no idea how old it is, but I am going to there, I just wiped my nose with it. I'm going to start using this handkerchief. I love that from a sustainability perspective. I love it from a, you know what? Use beautiful things because what's the point of just dying with these things in our drawers? So I just wanted to follow up on that because I thought it was timely since I saw this. So, and if you want to hear more about the Grand Edit, you can listen to the last podcast, which was 138, number 138. And this is number 139. So today I want to talk about tech boundaries. This is probably going to be on the shorter side, this podcast, because there are some very well researched guidelines in terms of creating tech boundaries. And so I'm just going to mention those quickly because, these are sort of easy things to remember. I really think the most important tech boundaries have to do with guarding your morning and your night, right? Guarding your morning is important because you don't, whatever you do at the first thing in the morning, that sets the tone for the whole day. And if you start doom scrolling first thing in the morning, then guess what? You have that in your brain the whole day. On the other side, if you are doom scrolling at night and you go to bed with those events or worries in your head, it's going to disrupt your sleep. And I have not been following my tech boundaries because of the escalation of events that have been happening in our country the last couple of weeks. And it finally affected my sleep this week. I had some horrible dreams. And it's interesting because I've also been following the Buddhist monks who have been on their peace walk from Texas to Washington, D.C. They're on, I want to say they're on day 80 something now. And it's going to be a roughly 120-day walk. So we still have a few more weeks of them walking. And I could literally feel my heart start beating slower and my heart open as I was listening to one of the monks speak. And if you haven't seen them, check it out. Walk for Peace. They actually do broadcast some of their chanting and prayers that they make during the day. And it is so heart opening. And I am very close to making a decision for myself in terms of what kind of media I'm going to watch for a number of reasons. One, I don't know if you're aware of how sophisticated the technology is, but it is very hard to pick out artificially manufactured video now. In fact, it's interesting because some schools in Scandinavia are actually educating, including in the kids' school curriculum, journalism and media awareness so that people can learn how to decipher truth from untruth. And the thing is that with the explosion of this technology, it's almost like, what's the point of looking when you can't verify that it's going to be true? It's interesting. I find myself going back to traditional news sources more now because I do know that they have a vetting process and I need information to be vetted before it goes, into my brain in some way. And look, vetting doesn't mean that you have to go with, a name brand news source, if you will, but it means that you need to know that you can trust whoever it is that you are listening to. So I think the most important things are to guard your morning and your evening. So I have had a practice of listening to ambient music that is actually tonal music. It's actually designed to awaken the chakras, the music that I listen to, and I listen to that first thing in the morning and last thing at the end of the day, and I do this while I'm doing my skincare, and I always notice how much more relaxed and unwound I am when I do that at night. And conversely, I always notice how much more positive and energized I am when I do it in the morning. However, and I've been doing it really regularly in the morning, but I have the last couple weeks been doing my skincare while reading the news because the news, it just hurts so much, and I feel like, I'm not in the middle of it, but the least I can do is bear witness. But I'm wondering if the bearing witness is just creating a negative loop. And so I've decided that I am going to focus more on the peace. I heard a saying by Mother Teresa: don't ever invite me to an anti-war rally, but I will show up at a peace. Oh, don't ever invite me to an anti-war protest, but I will show up at a peace rally any day of the week. I'm paraphrasing, obviously. But, there's something to be said about being pro what you want rather than anti what you don't want in terms of energetically. And I want to be pro what I want. I want to be pro constitution. I want to be pro human rights, pro peace, pro quality. So, yes, there are these research based parameters around tech boundaries, as in, like, at least an hour before you go to bed, don't be looking at a screen. But I would say even, maybe 2 hours before you get bed, not to be taking in that information and to be taking in information that is going to settle you, whether it's listening to ambient music or listening to some sort of guided meditation or listening to these peace walks, the prayers that they are chanting, something that is going to soothe and calm you. Now, the brain science does say you should not be looking at a screen that has blue light because the blue light inhibits your ability to sleep. Um, I'm not looking at my phone when I have the music playing, so maybe that's why, but I haven't noticed any effect that it has on me when I play the music before going to bed. Conversely, in the morning, I would say, definitely first thing in the morning, do not log on. But I would even challenge you to go as long as you can go without logging on. We all have other things that we can do. How long can you go without turning on a screen? It's interesting because, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I've actually been thinking, uh, I've actually been thinking about going backwards in terms of technology because one of the things I use my phone the most for are audiobooks. And I've been thinking about how I could use that benefit without having it attached to a phone, an internet, all the things that these devices can do. And apparently, this is a move that my kiddos' generation is starting to embrace, where they're wanting cameras that are just cameras. And some parents are even getting landlines again so that the kids can be on phones that are just phones. I did get my kiddo a camera that is just a camera because she doesn't have a smartphone. And it's something that I've been thinking about because listening to my ambient music in the morning and at night, and then listening to audiobooks, that is what I use my phone for mostly. And I would like to not allow the internet to creep in. So I have been thinking about that. Uh, you know, another another rule of thumb that you can do for tech boundaries is, like, for instance, my family, when it comes to watching entertainment, we have a rule that we don't watch any screens Monday through Thursday for entertainment. So we don't watch, movies or shows or even like YouTube shows, anything like that. So any scripted or unscripted entertainment is off limits Monday through Thursday. And that really just helps to set a hard boundary because we all know that that's the expectation. And so if one of us is starting to allow that to creep in, and usually it's, of course, my kiddo trying to push that boundary, I just say to her, "Hey, today's not a screen day." And she's like, "Okay." And as her people of her age group will do, she does try to push it when, she's homesick or whatever. I'm like, "No, you're homesick. You're not home to watch shows." So having that boundary is really helpful for our family in terms of Monday through Thursday. And then on the weekends, we have another boundary, which is no screen time before noon. So again, that just guards your morning. For someone like me who grew up just as computers were becoming a thing, and just as televisions were starting to move from just being in the family room to being in multiple rooms, I remember that we all found ways to spend our time without screens, whether it was as simple as digging in the dirt and staring at earthworms and bugs. I think that, the more that we can give our families the permission to step away from technology, the better it is for humans, just because that's how we're designed. We weren't designed for technology. We are designed to be outside. As an anthropologist, I studied anthropology in undergrad. I often say, we don't tell dolphins not to swim. We don't feed horses steak. We don't try to keep a bear up through winter and expect them to thrive, right? Like if you did any of those things, obviously you'd have an unhealthy, unfulfilled, grumpy dolphin, horse, and bear. And yet we do those sorts of things to ourselves all the time. We are meant to be outside. We are meant to move. We're meant to interact with people. And so the less time that I spend with technology, the happier and healthier I am in general. And having these boundaries of, no screen time at least an hour before bed, no screen time at least an hour after waking, although I try to push it until later in the day. No entertainment screen time Monday through Thursday, and then no entertainment screen time until afternoon on Saturday and Sunday. Those boundaries just all help to keep things really clear for my family and myself so that we can hold each other accountable. And as I mentioned, originally I wasn't going to talk about what kind of content you want to keep yourself from watching in terms of a tech boundary. However, given current events, I know that for myself, I am leaning into the peace and being pro what I want to see rather than anti what I don't want to see. Thank you so much for joining me. As I mentioned, next week is going to be about why and how to be a lifelong learner, how to embrace that as a philosophy for yourself and why you might want to. And as always, you can find all of my things at bywdreams.com, including my books. And thank you for joining me. And remember,